Hi guys, today I'm going to do a demonstration for some cinnamon scrolls. They're going to be super fluffy and super delicious. So for the dough we're going to need some milk, we're going to need butter, some eggs. I'm going to use a whole egg and an egg yolk, some white sugar, so not caster sugar, granulated sugar, and some dried yeast. Alright, let's get this dough happening. So into a measuring jug, and this is a Pyrex one that I can put in the microwave, I'm going to measure out 3/4 of a cup of milk. I'm going to warm this in the microwave. It needs to be warm to activate my yeast. I'm also going to add some butter, and my butter needs to be softened, so I'm actually going to add it to my milk and melt it down while it's warming in the microwave. So I've popped that in for about a minute, and while that's warming and that butter is melting down, I'm going to get my eggs ready. So in 1 cup I need a whole egg, so shells in the bin, and I also need an egg yolk. So I'm going to separate the egg white into a separate cup. I can use that egg white for maybe meringues or an egg white omelette, and I'm going to put the yolk in with the whole egg. So into a mixing bowl, I'm going to add my warm milk and melted butter, so that's ready now. And I'm going to add my yeast. So I need 2.5 teaspoons of dried yeast for this recipe. So I'm adding it to that warm milk, and that warmth is actually going to activate the yeast. Okay, so I'm just going to mix that up now, getting the yeast incorporated through that warm buttery milk. I'm going to use a rubber spatula for that. You could use a wooden spoon. And I'm going to get my sugar ready. So I've just added 1/4 cup of sugar into that recipe, and I'm going to mix that through. My eggs can go in now as well. Just going to break the yolks and mix them through. And then I'm going to get my flour ready. So for this recipe, we need 3 cups of plain flour. And I'm going to add it slowly into my mixture. So I'm adding about 1/4 of the flour mixture at a time, mixing it round with the wooden spoon or rubber spatula. Don't worry about lumps at this stage, it will be a little bit lumpy, but this is going to turn into a really firm dough that we're actually going to knead, so there won't be any lumps. Okay, so it's getting very sticky now. It's kind of cake battery at the moment. I've still got about 1/4 of the flour to add. And now I'm going to mix that in and form a really shaggy dough. Okay, that's looking really good. I'm nearly ready to knead this. Yep, I think I'll knead it now. So I'm going to flour down my clean bench. This flour is just going to stop the dough from sticking to the workbench. My hands are floured as well so that my hands won't stick too much to the dough. And I'm just going to tip that out onto the bench. So now I'm going to gently knead that dough, trying to pull it all together into a ball. So you can see it's actually starting to stick to my bench, and that's okay. That just means the dough's a little bit wet, so I'm going to add some more flour. So if your dough ever starts to stick, you just grab another tablespoon or so of flour, sprinkle it over, and keep kneading. All that flour will be incorporated into the dough, so you don't have to worry about it. So you're kneading with the palms of your hand, and you're rolling it around on the bench. So pushing down on the dough and pushing it forward. Now I'm going to speed this up because you have to knead this dough for about 8 minutes. So if you get tired, maybe palm it off to someone else, get them to have a go, and then you can pick up from where they finish. So I keep flouring my bench whenever it gets a little bit sticky, and I keep kneading. And that dough is getting really springy, really smooth. Okay, that's looking really good now. I've got about another minute of kneading. Sped up for your convenience. Okay, that looks awesome. I'm just gonna roll it around, form a nice ball. Now this is gonna have to be set aside and allowed to rise, and it needs to rise for about an hour and a half. So I'm gonna put my nice ball of dough into a butter greased bowl. So I've just greased it down a little bit so it won't stick. And I'm gonna cover it with some Glad wrap. Now this covered bowl needs to go somewhere dry and preferably a little bit warm. So maybe sitting on top of the stove that's not on, or maybe just on the kitchen bench. It just needs to be left aside for about an hour, maybe hour and a half, and it will grow. So this is about half an hour in. It started to puff up. You can see that it's a lot softer than when it was when I was kneading it, but it's not ready yet. And this is an hour and a half. You can see how big it has gotten. It is huge. It's a little bit jiggly too. It's perfect. All right, I'm gonna have to show you a up close personal view of this dough. Look how soft and springy it is. Okay, it's time to roll this dough out. So I've got a clean bench. I'm gonna flour that bench again, just so this dough doesn't stick. I've got a rolling pin. I've dusted that rolling pin in flour as well, so it's not gonna stick. And I'm gonna gently take my dough ball out and place it on the bench. Now I'm gonna roll this out pretty slowly. I'm gonna take my time because I wanna try and achieve a really even, really rectangular shape. So you might need to use your hand a little bit to pull it into shape because we are trying to get that long rectangle. And for size, you're roughly trying to get something that's about 9 inches wide by 12 inches long. And for thickness, it's under a centimeter, maybe 3/4 of a centimeter thick. Remembering this is gonna puff up, and by the time you roll it, it's actually gonna be quite a big scroll. All right, that looks great. Now I'm gonna cover it with some butter. So I've got a little bit of softened, slightly melted butter. I'm gonna grab about a tablespoon of it, and I'm gonna spread it over the surface of this dough with a rubber spatula. So this is going to stick all of my brown sugar and cinnamon mix to the dough. It's gonna make like a soft, gooey filling. So I've got 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar and 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon. I've also got a pinch of salt in there as well, and I've mixed that up. So I'm going to sprinkle it all over the surface of this dough, everywhere that I coated with butter. I'm trying to sprinkle it pretty evenly so there's no big gaps, but I am leaving maybe a centimeter or 2 around the edges. We don't want it to all ooze out. We want there to be a little gap that will stick the doughs together. So that's looking pretty good. I'm making sure I'm not leaving any spots untouched. Just do a little bit of Salt Bae as well. Alrighties. So once that's done, what I'm gonna do is brush over it gently and pat that brown sugar and cinnamon down so I know that it has a really smooth coating and that coating is attached to that butter. So very gently, I'm gonna start off this cinnamon roll. So one of the long edges, and I'm very gently going to roll it onto itself. So this might take a while. It's kind of like making a giant sushi roll. So ever so gently working back and forth along the roll. I'm just coiling it up. And that centimeter or 2 on the end without brown sugar is going to allow the dough to stick and close the scroll. So that's looking really good, making sure it's all attached, making sure it's nice and rounded. Don't worry too much about little straggly ends. If they are too straggly and they don't have any cinnamon sugar, you can chop the ends off so that they are nice and neat. I think I'm going to get about 10 scrolls out of this. Now because I'm cutting on my bench, I'm just going to use a butter knife, very gently cut down. I'm going to cut my log in half. That's the inside, it looks awesome. I'm going to put little markings on the top. So I'm going to roughly measure out, I'm going to try and get 5 out of each side and put a little indent on the top so I know that they will be even size. I don't want to cut down and realize that I get to the end and get the world's smallest scroll. So giving a little marking just allows you to roughly know how many you can cut out. So well and truly got 5 out. Might get a few more out of that, so maybe 5 or 6. I think I made my little markings a little bit too small, so I'm going to make them a bit bigger. So there we go, that's 5. So that mixture should make 10 cinnamon scrolls. Awesome. Perfect. Okay, so these are going to go into a metal tray that's lined with a little bit of baking paper. You're going to want to leave about 1 centimeter or 2 around each scroll because they are going to puff up. You can gently reshape them as you put them in. Now these are not ready to bake yet, so these need to actually proof and get a little bit puffier as well. So what we're going to do is get them in that tray, put a piece of Glad wrap over the top of them, and leave them on the bench for another 45 minutes. So that's going to allow that dough to proof. It's going to make them nice and fluffy, and then we will bake them. So these 4, I could put them in another tray, but I'm actually just going to pop them in the freezer in a little container. So you can see the space that I'm leaving between them. They're nice and soft. And I'm popping those spares into a container in the freezer. They can then just be pulled out, popped back in a tray and baked again. So these have sat for 45 minutes. They have proofed. They're in the oven now. They're going to cook for about 18-20 minutes on about 160. And this is how they should turn out. Look at that. They could have icing drizzled over them, but I like them how it is. They're straight from the oven, so they're super gooey, super hot. But I'm going to have to taste it right now.